All of us as hunters look forward and anticipate the unknown every year. As summer ends and fall approaches, that's one of the things that we look forward to. We look forward to seeing what deer show up, what deer made it, what deer are around to hunt that fall. And this year was no different for me. I was super excited to target one specific buck. This is a buck that we have history with from the last 3 years. He first came on our radar in actually 2018, showed up as what we thought then as a 4.5-year-old, showed up late season. We had standing beans and he really moved into that area and got a lot of pictures of him that winter. And that was the buck I called the 80-10. I called him the 80-10 because for the last 2 years he was a big 10 and really I was hunting him on a small 80-acre chunk. Now this property that I'm hunting is not that big. It's 80 acres, but a lot of it is standing corn. The timber section is probably 15, 20 acres, and it runs in a long sliver. It runs north to south. A lot of the deer bed right in the center of that timber. There's some rolling knobs in there, it's thick, so the deer bed in really an advantageous spot for us hunters. We can slip in from the south or we can slip in from the north. Access here is actually pretty key. 2 years in a row, the ag has been standing corn. We can access it from the north side of the corn, we can access it from the south side of the corn. And there's no real woods that run along that corn until you get to that back strip. So we can slide in on the south end or slide in on the north end without really being detected by any of those deer. Transitioning into 2019, on October 20th, that deer showed back up. It was in a similar area that he was in late season, and it was kind of in the timber there. There's a small opening in the timber, and those deer generally had a lot of scrapes there. Well, this deer started showing back up and became more regular right around that time. This is the time of year that mature bucks really start to get on their feet during the daylight and can really take advantage of this time of year, mature bucks being on their feet and starting to check those scrapes more in the daylight. One thing that I was focused on right now is waiting for the right time to get in here. As much as I had good access, I knew that the timber on this piece wasn't very big, so I didn't want to blow deer out of there. We had 2 different cell cameras in the area, and we were just waiting really for this deer to start showing up more regularly. Where I had my stand set was more south. It was on the exterior because I didn't want to push in too far and bump this deer. But as I saw more and more pictures of him, I realized that I needed to get in tighter to this deer's new core area. So now we get into November. It's November 6th. I'm expecting this deer to be with does. I'm getting more and more pictures of not only does, but that buck there too. So it's time to make a move. We get a snowstorm, it's high pressure, it's cold. I'm gonna take my climber and I'm gonna go on a covert mission and try to get in there tight to this deer in his core area. Pretty much as soon as I get up there, I look and about 150 yards in front of me, I see 2 deer stand up. Sure enough, I pull my binoculars up, it's a doe, and it's the 80-10 right with her. Now I know just the way this timber lies, these deer want to work north to south. I've been getting a lot of pictures of this deer moving that same direction, north to south. Now they're not working very fast at all. They're moving slow. You can tell they're together. This doe has not been bred yet, but she's ready. She's coming in, and this 80-10 is not going to leave her side. He's just working slowly behind her and won't let her out of his sight. As they work my way, they kind of go out to the edge of the field. They get a slight bite to eat in the standing cornfield, and they work back into the timber. Unfortunately, they stay just out of range. They pass by at 45 yards once or twice. It was thick. I just didn't feel comfortable taking the shot. I was self-filming and just never had a real good high percentage shot opportunity. As these deer work back into the woods and they start working away from me, kind of back to where they came from, they really slow down even more. The doe is stopping, she's posturing. The buck is working up behind her and he starts to lick her back end. Rarely do you ever really see it personally, or I haven't, out in the timber, and I knew it was about to happen. Sure enough, that buck rears up and he actually breeds the doe right in front of me. What a cool experience to see a buck of this caliber really passing on his genetics. It makes it exciting for years to come. You know, it was kind of a bittersweet moment. I didn't get a shot. I had him so close that day. But overall, such a cool experience. That just made it even that much more enticing to go after that deer. And that day, November 6th, is really a day that is talked about by a lot of people in the upper Midwest as a peak breeding day. You know, this is kind of confirmation of that. There's a lot of different opinions out there on when does get bred, but it was great to see November 6th, kind of a day that you think is a peak breeding day and a peak breeding time during this week. Does are getting bred. I did hunt that deer a few times after that, never saw him again. And then the following weekend, gun season kicked in here in Minnesota. That deer kind of vanished from my radar. After the past 2 years of history, you know, I really had an idea of how I wanted to approach this deer moving into the fall. I started early. One of the things that I did was went out there as the corn was still growing. This is July, and really just scouted it out. I knew that this deer was spending a lot of time on the south in 2019 and wanted to see what that north looked like and how I could put a strategy together to take advantage of what I already knew using the past 2 years of experience. Getting out there early, one of the first things that I noticed was the neighbors had a bean field just to the north that bordered the timber that I thought this deer was living in. I went in there and I hung a stand right in this transition area. I moved into the woods a little further. We'd had a stand out there previously on the edge, but I wanted to move in a little further. There were some main trails and they all came together in this one spot. One of the other things that we did was improve the access into this spot. We went in and were able to clear 2 trails on the north side and the south side, just expanding the timber a little bit, expanding our trail so we could slip in and out of there quieter. Another key piece early was getting our cell cameras in there. I put cell cameras up on each end of the property so I didn't have to go back in. They were gonna send me information and I didn't have to go in there. When I did go in there to hang the stand, hang the camera, scent control was on point. The last thing that I wanted to do was leave any scent in the area because I know this is a big mature deer. At this point going into 2020, he's 6 years old, and the last thing that I want to do is spook him before I even have a chance at him. So I was ahead of the game now. In late July, early August, I have a month, 2 months before the season even opens to let that kind of any scent that I might have left behind, let it go away. That intrusion, you get that done during the summer, and I had an idea, you know, just going based on the past 2 years of what strategy I wanted to apply. Got it done, and now it was just a waiting game for the season to open and to see if this deer was going to show up. Late August rolls around, and boom, sure enough, guess who shows up? The 8010. He actually shows up on the north side of this property in that transition area that I talked about, going to the neighbor's beans to the north. That's something that we as hunters can all take advantage of early. Our season opens here in Minnesota mid-September. You can still catch some of those deer on their summer patterns. If you're on the ball, you have that intel and you can take advantage of it. So having that cellular camera in there early let me know that, hey, here's the deer that are using this area, and potentially now the 80-10, and I could maybe take advantage of it. Lo and behold, that deer showed up there one time, and that was really it. He wasn't using it regularly. I don't think that he was living right there. I think he passed through there, but going by my intel, I really didn't want to go in there and hunt it early because he wasn't there but one time. Now the season's progressing. I hunted through September and October and got to see some really great deer. Frankly, had some really great bucks in front of me, but just not the right one, not the one that I wanted to pull the trigger on. After the experience that I've already had with the 80-10, I knew that that was the deer I wanted to hunt, and I just had that feeling that I had to wait until that late October, early November timeframe to get my shot at him. Finally, late October, my phone goes off and there's a picture of the 80-10 in the daylight on that southern side of the property, right where he was last year. You know, I was like a kid on Christmas. This is what I hoped for, this is what I strategized for, and I knew now was the right time to get in there and start hunting this deer. I'm a big believer in habit when it comes to these deer. I think that big deer learn to do the same thing year after year. They're smart enough to understand that they can work smarter and not harder. So I think that big deer are the first ones to get does when they come into heat. I think they know where to go to get those does, and I think they do habitually the same thing year after year. November 2nd rolled around and it was high pressure. It was a little warmer that day, but high sun, high pressure, it just felt like a good day to be out there. I went in from the south side and I slipped along that corn edge, slipped in there nice and quiet. I did have a west wind, which is really marginal for this area, but I figured I could get away with it. My scent control was on point and it was just the day that I needed to be in the tree. So I get in the tree and I get everything set up and I pull my phone out and I'm kind of going through my phone and I get a notification. And that notification is from my other camera that's on the north side of the property. Guess who it is? 8010. He's up and moving in the daylight. He's on his feet, and really as the crow flies, that camera's probably only 300 yards away from where I am. Well, as I sat there, I started hearing things in the corn out to my left, and it was like thrashing. It sounded like a bear rolling around in there. You know, and that went on for probably 10 minutes. Finally, I could see something appear from the corn to my left. Saw Rack and knew immediately it was him. This deer is working his way into the woods and I know exactly what he's gonna do. He's got 3 scrapes that are in a line that go past me. He's coming into the opening and I know that I'm about to get a chance at this deer. He's all by himself and he's just on a mission. He comes into the woods, stops and hits the first scrape. At this point, I'm getting my bow ready. I got the camera on him, I'm filming him, and just waiting for him to start transitioning down by me. So he hits that scrape, he starts working further towards me, hits the opening, and he's on a dead walk right at me. I pull back wide on the camera. I'm just waiting for this deer to get to the scrape below me. He's 40 yards, he's 30 yards in closing, tension on the string, and I'm ready to draw back. He's on a dead walk right at me, and then all of a sudden, stops. Looks right at me. Thankfully, I have some good cover, so he just kind of looks through me, but he doesn't continue on. He turns and makes a button hook and starts walking exactly perpendicular with me. I have no shot. I pull the camera back. I'm getting ready, trying to transition to where he's walking. It's just too brushy. I have no shot, and he's walking, circling me at 30 yards. As he's circling me, I start thinking in my head, oh no, he's going downwind. He doesn't know exactly what I am, but as mature bucks do, he's gonna circle downwind and he's gonna try to figure it out. Sure enough, that buck gets directly downwind and it's blowing right at him and he never lifts his nose. So this deer's circling and all I'm looking for is that little window. He's walking directly downwind, he's in my scent cone, and he finally gets to a spot where it's my last chance. This is where I have to shoot.
I just shot the 8010. He's a freaking giant.
I can't even explain to you what I felt at that moment. You know, everything, the strategy, the hard work, the intel, all came to a culmination at that point. And to boot, that deer did the opposite of what I thought he would do. He circled me all the way through my scent cone and never got my wind. He never knew I was there, and I was able to get that opportunity. I'm gonna show you where these wind floaters are going in a second. That deer is a 6.5-year-old deer and walked straight through my scent cone. We don't have a strong wind today. It's probably 6 miles an hour. We're getting towards the evening. The thermals are pushing it right down. And I am telling you that this
deer, I mean, walked directly through my scent cone and never lifted his head. That is unbelievable. Phase is the real deal. I've been a believer, but that right there, that has absolutely put an exclamation point on what phase can do, because that is a 6.5-year-old deer that just circled 30 yards downwind of me, walked through my entire scent cone, and I shot him right there straight downwind.
You know, I thought I made a really good hit, but at that point you second guess yourself. You know, all these things are rushing through your head. So, you know, I'm a big believer in when in doubt, back out, better safe than sorry. You know, if he runs over there and dies, he'll be dead in the morning. Decided to play it safe, got Adam, and we were gonna go in there the next morning and try to find him. Fingers crossed, it was a sleepless night, but we're back, and we're gonna slip in there and see if we can put our hands on this deer. So we go back in there the next morning, start where I shot, and you know, we go about 10 yards and there's the arrow laying there. And I picked up the arrow and I knew immediately that that was a good sign. You know, painted red, it's what you want to see. You know, so we start to move a little further and I look up. I can see his rack. Dude, he is a stud. He didn't go anywhere. The last place I saw him, that's where he laid down. Look at this deer. That is by far the biggest buck that I've ever shot. Look at him. Look at that deer. That is a mature warrior right there. November 2nd, moving during the daylight. The rut here in Minnesota, this is what we hunters live for. This is unbelievable. You know, walking up to this deer, it had been 6 years since I had shot a whitetail. It's been years of passing deer and waiting for the right one and strategizing around it. This is a 6.5-year-old buck that I'm putting my hands on. My biggest buck ever, and that's why I whitetail hunt. It's about everything that goes into that moment right there when you finally get to put your hands on it. I couldn't have been happier. I mean, just a deer of a lifetime, and everything that went into that, for that to come together like it did, is absolutely priceless. So there was definitely a few things that made this hunt all come together. The first thing was definitely just using information from the past several years to put a strategy together to capitalize on this specific buck. I knew what he did in 2018 and 2019 and waited for the right time to move in 2020. Another thing is that low impact strategy. I got the work done early. I got my cell cameras in there. I didn't go in there after that. I wasn't going in there and leaving scent and pressuring those deer out of there. I let those cameras work for me. I let them send me the intel and waited for the right time and the right window to go in there and hunt that deer. Access was another key part. I could get in on these deer without them knowing that I was even there. Another key factor in this hunt was scent control, and really the do-all end-all in this hunt. As much as I could get in there with bulletproof access, and I was hunting a pretty good wind. This deer did what mature bucks do. He still ended up downwind. You know, he knew something was up, he circled me, ended up downwind, and I had to rely on my scent control to give myself the opportunity. I used the phase system, and I can tell you that I'm a believer because that 6.5-year-old deer walked directly downwind of me through my scent cone, never lifted his nose, and I was surgical when I went into this stand. It was the first time that I hunted it. I wasn't going in there time after time. I wasn't over pressuring it. I wasn't hunting just to hunt. I was picking the right window. I was letting the cameras tell me when to hunt, when the deer was there, waited for the weather, the wind, and everything came together that day. And that was the first time I hunted that stand, and I ended up capitalizing on the deer of a lifetime.